Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. In this episode, we're diving into how to nail your coffee roasting consistency. Now, being a good roaster isn't just about roasting delicious coffee. It's also about how to do it really consistently from batch to batch. And one of the biggest things that affects consistency is your roaster warm-up, but also your between batch protocol. And so that's what this episode is all about. It flew by fast. There was so much to cover, and we hope you find some golden nuggets in here. Anyways, let's get into this. Let's pour some batchy. Let's just get into this. There's something, I brewed this batchy a minute ago, and then Sergio and I got into a conversation for quite some time, but there's something tasty in this cup, I hope. And I hope it's still cool. I hope it's still tasty even after sitting around. So we'll see.
I mean, speaking of fellow products,
I know. I'm so tempted to buy one. I'm just like, it's probably not a good financial decision.
not
But
right now. Me too.
dude, $1,100, $300 off plus $100 in fellow drop credits.
That's a great deal.
It's a smoking hot deal.
Yeah.
So
Did you bring this from Seattle?
I did.
Hey, I just realized today, I mean, I'm like the classic home barista nowadays, chilling at home, watching Lance Hedrick's videos for hours on my brew bar.
Perf.
Classic. I don't know why I just realized that Monolith is built in Seattle.
Yep.
Isn't that wild? Like, why don't we see a lot of monoliths in cafes in this area?
I mean,
Supposedly
you don't see
pretty good.
anything but EKs in cafes. You don't even see
know.
EG1s.
No, EG1 kind of makes
It's a
sense.
rare-
The most expensive
it's very rare.
grinder, and
Yeah.
it's like I feel like the reason EKs are common is because they're also expensive, but they're almost like it's just a mill.
Yeah, it's like
And EG1s are like for the dudes who know, or not the dudes,
Yeah.
the people who know,
yeah,
the homies that know. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
yeah, you walk in like, oh, sick. So it's like a different, I think not only is it a different vibe, it's just a different level of grinder, you know.
I think I'm more and more realizing that in this sense, like home baristas are way more maybe advanced, but I guess it depends because you're buying for different things. Like at the cafe, you have to think about workflow, versatility, speed, ease of use. You don't have 10 minutes for puck prep. Like you kind of have to make different decisions, but
I feel like single dosing, like, I mean, when I was at Narrative, we were single dosing into the EK. There's nothing different between that or a EG1.
right. But the EK then will ground coffee for drip.
Yeah,
You're not going to throw
that's true. Like,
120 grams
through the
into
single.
an EG1, one, so there's just
not its
different,
purpose,
but
that also, like, my other idea for a podcast episode today was like, oh, we should talk about like how to purchase a grinder, which sounds ridiculous, but I think a lot of the new stuff that Lance has been talking about, and once we get Lance on, we'll probably chat about this, is finding not the best grinder but the right one. You know, because he was using did you watch a little test he did, the volcano thing, the peaking of extraction and shots that are 16 to 20 are peak consistency seconds, like something. He was using the Monolith, and he explained why.
interesting.
So like finding the right grinder I think that's a value for cafes, is understand the menu you want to use, and then finding the right grinder that fits that menu.
I agree.
That's how you should be designing, because there's a lot of good grinders.
I've actually been thinking about something similar.
Yeah.
What inspired me was actually my last, when I was in Portland last time, I visited Gilder, Juniors Roasting, and they had the Swan
Yeah.
with a Strata X, and it was interesting to see that they were using a Swan, and they had a Mazur Philos, the new one, also. So they actually had a stacked bar and equipment setup, but I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm like, interesting. It, to a certain extent, makes sense depending on the kind of style of shot you want to go really intentional with that. Like, do you want something a little more syrupy? It's probably not a great idea.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you're going for, but it's not a great idea to pull like high uniformity shots
Yeah.
that are going to be very like extreme clarity, very bright and stuff. You know, like it's just stuff like that where I feel like cafes don't. I guess I don't hear it talked about in that sense. But what do you think about this batch?
I think it's great. You brought this from Seattle? Yeah. Yeah. I think it's great. Is it a geisha? Yeah.
It is. Wow. Okay.
It's definitely a geisha. It's very nice.
I didn't realize. I didn't think it was that geisha like.
Very.
But
Floral,
it's a natural
fruit.
Floral fruit. Yep.
Yeah, floral, like big fruit, high clarity.
Can't get
high
some more.
acidity, like good acidity, I mean. Now if you ask me who the roaster is, like I have no idea. I know the cafe you went to, but I don't know who you picked up there. So no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you go to Slow?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, nice.
I did. It's a hole in the wall. It's like this big.
For some reason I thought they bought was there another cafe in that spot?
I don't know, but it's tiny.
tiny.
It has one chair in there, but I like it. I like it a lot, actually.
It's like the old school Iron Rooster vibe.
Yeah, I like it. It's like, if you're in Seattle and you're listening to this podcast, you should go check them out. It's called Slow Day Coffee. Great, really great, fantastic menu. But yeah, it's just very small, one barista, very slow.
Very slow.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's
it's like
great.
a slow vibe. It's
I love
like,
that. I'm not
hey,
laughing
slow
as
pour.
yeah, exactly.
You know,
That's great.
yeah. So it's great. I enjoyed it. I'll be back. They had an interesting system that every coffee bag is $25 flat, and I was like, interesting. Like I've just never seen that happen before, and I was like, it's an interesting model. Like.
I was talking to someone yesterday about
That
yeah,
even pricier coffees you're getting at $25, and I'm like,
cheaper or less expensive coffees you're getting at $25.
that's interesting.
Yeah. Also getting like a lot of tropical fruit and peach at the same time, which
That's
is
exactly the flavor notes.
Really? What is it?
It's tropical juice, nectarine, and florals.
Oh, yeah. This coffee is high clarity.
Yep.
Okay. Who is it roasted by?
September.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
I was just talking to Kyle when he was at the airport and that whole situation. I literally just told him like yesterday and was like, dude, like I need to buy some coffee, but can't really afford to buy much right now. Dude, thanks. Like I'm so stoked on this. Like this is great. And thanks, Kyle. Like I guess my dream did come true.
Yeah.
No, this is solid. This is the best September coffee I've ever had. I mean, I also haven't had September since like they first launched.
I would say this is probably the best September coffee I've had. This is like
so wild.
It's very well, like it's spectacular green.
Yeah.
And
this is a Wilder?
Really well roasted.
Wilder?
No, this is like Jose Cuello or Cuello or I don't know. Sorry, I'm probably butchering it, but Geisha Natural. Yeah, it's
great.
It's for natural also. Super clean, very nice, not
complex
funky.
Too.
Complex. It's
wow.
And surprisingly, like a lot of flavor coming through from something that's roasted. On the color is like very light.
Did you measure it?
Yeah.
Ultralight?
So no, I don't think so. But
okay.
I mean, I guess it depends on what you call it. I mean, it's close, but
yeah. This is great. Yeah,
I would say it's and the fact that it was extracted on the Aiden, like that cup.
Yeah, that's even wilder.
That's that's even wilder. Anyways,
wow, incredible.
I could probably say much more about that.
I mean,
but
thanks Kyle, because I literally the funny thing is we were just chatting on the phone and I was like, dude, like I want some of your coffee, so this is great.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So speaking of well roasted coffees, I think like over the last year, of course, I know we've mentioned this a few times, our roasting has changed quite a bit, significantly, and it's just we've just been learning, testing, trying new things, and making changes accordingly. And I think they've been really great changes. Received tons of great feedback on some latest Wilton. Alex Rosa. I don't know if you're listening or watching, but multiple times has messaged about the Wilton being that great. And that's not only a different kind of coffee that we've sourced, but also a different, like a fairly different roast approach that we didn't think we would be doing before, you know? So, but with that also comes with, like, it's not just about, you know, roasting a good coffee, roasting it well, but how can you do that over and over and over and over again?
Totally.
And consistency is a big deal. And I think, like, for example, like the last roast aid that you did was like killer. I mean, we're measuring color and Sergi's, you know, color readings on the same coffee, batch to batch to batch. There was a 1 point differential on the color, which I was like, that's just killer. That's exactly the way it should be. And weight loss was like within like 0.5% or something. So it was like, it was spot on. And so that's hopefully is like what, as a roaster, you know, you're looking for, not just great roasts, but hopefully you can roast well, but then also how do we make that as consistent as possible? And I think to get into this is like building right systems, from anywhere from green coffee storage to, but especially your roaster warm-up, session and your between batch protocol. So
that's true. Like, that's awesome. Like, I'm honestly, like, I'm so stoked where we've, like, how far we've came when it comes to like our roasting approach, our just coffees in general. Like, we've just gone so far, and like, I'm so proud that we're here. And I know we can even go further, but I think one of the major keys to that is creating a system. We did another podcast on systems, so I'm not going to repeat that. But the major system that has allowed us to do this has been warming up the roaster. And I think that's one thing that's like underestimated a lot, is like, oh, you just turn it on and pump the gas and let it heat up and, you know, drop some coffee. And it's like, nope. You have to really understand that the stability of the machine, the actual heat stability in the drum, is super crucial to getting that repeated curve. And I remember when I was learning how to roast at SCA, they didn't teach me that. But I remember Jason Kellaway taught me a little trick about, make sure that these two temps are closer together. And now, as we've established that, I'm realizing how, in order to achieve that, which he was right, but in order to achieve that, the warm-up session, literally, is crucial. And I think for us, we're about at 40 minutes before we even start charging a coffee. It's like almost an hour where we're not heating up to the max of the temperature, because that's also bad. I think sometimes, like in the past, I've seen roasting companies and roasters just like crank up the heat to 11, you know, boost it, let it get fiery, and then lower it. And that's also not beneficial. The other side of all of this is the key to knowing what is beneficial. Like, if you look at our SOP, we have so many amendments. Like, we do this, we do that now. And the reason we've changed a lot of things is because the more we roast, the better we understand how our Diedrich IR12 works right now. You know, so there's not, like, the more things we'll share on this podcast, like the more tips and tricks that we give out on this podcast, I want to preface with saying, like, hey, just remember, even if you have a Diedrich, the size of it is going to matter. A lot of things are going to play a role. Even your building is going to matter, like the space that it's in. We were just talking about that, how important the warm-up is when it's 50 degrees outside. And we're warming up the room also, because we're not leaving the heat on in our roastery all day, every day. But we have to get the room warmed up and the roaster warmed up. And when those sync together, it's important.
Right. And, you know, I think especially for folks who have like classic, your typical drum roaster, not like a Loring or an IMF, even though that matters there too, but especially there, here with drum roasters, you're kind of balancing not only, you know, how hot your drum is getting, which is not a perforated drum. Perforated just means like there's holes. It's a little perforated drum, which impacts your conductive heat transfer. And so for like a Diedrich, for example, an issue is that like the drum gets way too hot. And so that causes a lot of conductive heat transfer, and conductive heat transfer kind of hurts development a little bit. You can't go as quite as light as maybe you'd want to, because then you get like kind of like, if you think about like scorching, your beans are touching a hot temperature and they're getting scorched by this heat, but the heat's not permeating the bean straight through.
Right.
So what a good warm up does is it helps heat up the machine. But again, like Sergi said, you're not just cranking the heat, because if you just crank the heat, you've fired up that steel drum. You've got it super hot, which is then already getting you off to a bad start, because you don't want the drum to just be scalding hot. But you do want to warm up the drum, and warm up the inside of the roaster. And so you kind of have to balance that out a little bit. Like we're like heating up the drum, the roaster, till about like 430 degrees Fahrenheit. And even how long we choose to get there, how fast we warm up is like on a timer. And then how long we idle at that temperature is on a timer as well. And from there, how we come down in temperature and what we do is also timed, like you said, with temperature. So if it's the winter out, it's freaking cold outside, that warm up gets extended a little bit, because we want to make sure that the roaster is thoroughly warmed up. The room also impacts that as well. And then in the summer, we might not like want to heat it up as quite as hot. And in the summer, we're also changing our between batch protocol, but we'll get there. But the warm up kind of sets up your roaster. And something I've noticed is, if you're not being attentive and you let your temperature get away from you, all of a sudden, you quickly notice your first batch is a little wonky. Your second batch is a little wonky. It's not tracing the curve as well. And that's simply because, maybe instead of idling at 430, your temperature sways up into the 450s and 460s, which is too hot. You might have gotten distracted, labeling bags or, doing something else. You quickly notice it right off the bat.
Totally. And going back to like even ambient temperature, like understanding the fact that like, hey, if again, depending on your actual roasting space, like if that isn't at consistent temp, then of course the machine that's sitting in there is not on, it's not powered. It's going to be a different, like when I just now mentally like always track, like when I turn on the roaster in the very beginning, when I turn on all the buttons before I even plug it into Cropster, before I fire up Cropster, I see the little on the machine temperature gauge. And if it's cold outside and it's fairly low, then I understand it's going to take it a little more time and energy to get there, right? To the idling temp. And you don't want it to be super long, so you don't want it to be super slow, but you also, again, don't want to rip all the way up there. And the reason you don't want to rip is because everything that you're gauging, like all of your gauges, the probes, they're not touching the metal, right? They're in the air. So even the drum probe, like the bean probe, it's inside the drum, but it's getting the ambient temperature of inside the drum.
Right.
But the reality is the drum is not being warmed up from the inside, it's be warmed up from the outside.
Right.
And the heat that the probe is measuring is going through metal. So that means that metal is going to be hotter than what is actually the probe reading. Right? So when you warm up super quick, the radiant heat inside the drum is not equilibrium to the metal. And I think that's why, like, sometimes you'll get inconsistent development in coffees, not because you, quote unquote, did 10% DTR or 11 or 25% DTR. Like, not because of that, but simply because your whole roast, that heat transfer, that what you were talking about, that conductive heat transfer is now slightly off because of your warm up, whether it was consistent or inconsistent. So that's like a big thing. And then again, the between batch, like the follow-up, because you're kind of doing the same thing, and how you schedule out, that's another thing, how we schedule out our roasts. If we're doing like a coffee that's dropping like well over 400 degrees, like 410, let's say, it's not going to be like our first roast because we don't want to roast hotter coffees in the beginning.
Right.
We want to roast cooler coffees that we're dropping a little cooler before we get that heat all the way up. Because especially if you're having a long roast day, you're roasting for hours, that heat is gradually building and building and building.
Right. Right. And, your warm up kind of sets your roast day up for success. But then, the way we schedule our roast day is we get the smaller batches done first, and the batches that are our lightest roasts, we try to have them come much earlier in the day because we don't want that conductive heat transfer to get in the way of nice development. We still want to be able to roast them light and get thorough development, but not be hurt by maybe some scorching from the drum.
Don't want
stuff.
that gradient.
Yeah. And, from there, we're roasting our biggest batches that may need a little kick in energy later in the day because the machine would have been way more stable, has way more like inertia energy already in that's driving, our bigger 12-pound, 18-pound batches that we're taking even more developed. Those are a little easier to do later on in the day. But also, your warm up sets you up for success, but then you have your between batch protocol, which is so important because it's keeping your day kind of consistent and keeping your batches just functioning the way they should be. Because the point is you're trying to just trace the curve. And if your between batch protocol is off, you try to hurry it up or you try to put too much energy in or something like that, you risk making some changes to your roast because again, like we're talking about like heat transfers and conductive heat energies. Like if you screw up with between batch protocol, well, you just sped up the energy in that roaster maybe sooner than if this makes sense. I don't even know if this makes sense, but like if you heat up the drum too fast, you don't be attentive to your between batch protocol, then all of a sudden you have to deal with that hotter drum for the rest of the roast day. It's not like one of those things where, you just pour water on it and it cools down.
No.
It's not that easy. And especially when you're talking about a hunk of metal, you have to be super gentle. It's like once you get into it being too hot, it's so hard to suck energy out of there. And then what is that, how long, what's that going to even take? So you much rather just do it right the first time. And that's what between batch protocol does. It's meant to keep the energy the same, and especially as you get more in the day, it's meant to maintain that energy. So it's because your roaster is already gradually getting hotter. You should talk about that a little bit as to how your between batch protocol kind of changes throughout the day and why you do that.
Especially on bigger roast days, right? If you have a smaller roast day, there's not much changes going on. But as in the beginning, especially for the first few roasts, like kind of keep everything absolutely as consistent. Everything's trying to be always consistent, but with our kind of SOP, our classic, where we will, after the coffee is charged, roast is done, dropped, and then we're cooling down that roaster. The way I even had to, and maybe this is one of the things I forgot to tell you, because when I'm cooling down the roaster, the initial cool down with like when I open up the door, I'm holding it to like a little over a minute now instead of just like we used to do 45 seconds back in the day. And the reason is I want that rush of cool air to get it to cool down, but it won't keep it there because once you close it, there's still, like you were saying, a lot of energy. It's not going to do the job, but it's going to help kickstart it. The other thing is like being very consistent about making sure as you drop the coffee in the very beginning, you turn everything off. Like that was one of the things that if there was a time, if I started my between batch protocol by not turning off the gas setting, literally from 10% to 0, if I didn't do that, it would completely mess up how my machine cools down. Just that little from 10% to 0. If I didn't just turn that burner off, finished. You know, and then letting cool air, like, because one, especially on the Diedrich, the challenge is like, okay, your air is both, you can only modulate it a few ways, like all the way through the drum, 50-50 or through the cooling bin.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is you need air through the cooling bin because you need the roasted coffee to cool down. But then again, you need that boost of cooler air to cool down the drum as well. So we found that timing is like, okay, about at 2.5 minutes, the coffee has enough cool down somewhat already, so we can add a little air into the drum to get it there. And then how long you hold it there with the air running through the drum also matters, because if you cool down the machine way too low, that could potentially be a challenge when you're about to charge and you're trying to find that meeting point between your bean temp and the inlet probe, and it's very far apart. It's going to create inconsistency. And you'll see like on if you watch our video that we did on the dial-in, like seeing that red line with the ROR line, like those both have to trace for consistency.
Right.
Like, and when they don't, it creates other issues, right?
Right.
So how you get back to that temp after cool down is absolutely crucial.
Yeah. So, tell them, how does your BBP change with the roast day as you go forward?
So right around when I'm hitting about 5, like batch 5, batch 6, depending on what coffee I'm charging, and if I still especially have to do a lot of our lightest roasted coffees, like Wilton's coffees recently, I've been then cooling the machine down for about 3 more minutes. So instead of like getting it to temp by 12, I'm closer to 15 minutes at this time to cool it down, to stabilize it. But also I'm no longer stabilizing it at, usually we do 40 degrees. I'm stabilizing it at 50 degrees below charge. So I'm holding it at a cooler temp for a bit, like 2 to 3 minutes longer, and then bringing it up. That helps reset that energy a little more, especially throughout the day when the machine is just cranking. And of course, like what you said about like thinking about also batch size, like when my batch sizes get bigger, it's a little bit easier. But if my batch sizes are getting smaller or the same, like some of our smallest batch sizes are 6 pounds, think of it this way, like you're dropping in coffee beans into your drum. Those coffee beans are at about 65 degrees. That's cool air. So that's why you see the cool down. Like your ROR is technically not going negative, you know what I mean? But that you see that cool down. If you have more beans at 65 degrees, what's happening? It's going to cool down the drum much quicker. And that's why charge temp changes. But also how you achieve that cool down. So if your last batches now are, let's say you're charging at 410. This is just hypothetical. I don't know if we have a coffee that we charge at 410, but let's say you're getting to the point in the day where you're charging at 410. When you're dropping that temperature, it's not basically cooling down at the same temperature, obviously, because it's 40 degrees lower or 50 at the end of the day. It's cooling down at, let's say you were going from 380 to 330, right? That's 50 degrees, let's say. But now from 410, you're going to 360. So there's a differential in heat there. And that is dependent on that bigger batch size. And the reason that's important, if you bounce back, going from, even if you keep your protocol the same, but you go from roasting a charge temp at 400 to a charge temp at 360 to a charge temp at 410, your machine isn't gradually stabilizing, it's bouncing all over the place, or the heat in the machine. And that will create a nightmare. Like even if your between batch protocol is like dialed. And that's why I change things at the end of the day and making sure that I'm cooling it down more to have that gradual rise in stability and heat in the machine. So very long-winded, but
yeah, that was we're already like 20 minutes into just talking about warm up in between batch. But that all being said, I don't know, maybe there's somebody that's listening that, this is like turning some gears and this is very roaster nerdy. But yeah, that's like, do not neglect BBP it's been super helpful for us to just managing our roast, especially for our lighter coffees, especially for consistency's sake. Like, man, there's nothing more frustrating than like measuring coffees and seeing that their color is changing. And when you're cupping them side by side, flavor is also changing, even though you're dropping at nearly the same numbers. It's like, it's frustrating, but your between batch protocol helps a lot with that. So, that's a wrap. Any last final thoughts?
I think that was the most practical advice detail I've given on roasting so far on this podcast.
Yeah.
So like, honestly, like there's AI that can transcribe this for you. And if you're struggling with repeatability, go let it transcribe, read my stuff.
Yeah.
A little novel there. I know it was long-winded. So if you stuck around, thank you.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, the comments, the DMs are open, the email. But that's it, friends. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. And as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.